The first indication that something out of the ordinary was about to happen came a few minutes after midnight, when internal sirens began to echo through the underground corridors of one of the most heavily guarded military installations of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps near the Strait of Hormuz. The complex, hidden among mountain formations and protected by craggy rocks rising above the dark waters of the Gulf, was considered one of the most strategic points in the entire region. From there, Iranian officers oversaw drone operations, coordinated anti-ship missile batteries, and controlled coastal defense networks capable of threatening any vessel crossing that vital maritime corridor for world trade. For years, the fortress had been expanded, reinforced, and buried ever deeper under reinforced concrete and underground tunnels. Radars silently rotated on armored platforms, while elite soldiers patrolled narrow passages illuminated by red emergency lights. For the Iranian commanders, that position was virtually impossible for an enemy force to take. They believed that no ground operation would dare to cross the mountains, no air strike could completely neutralize their defenses, and no enemy would dare to directly attack one of the main forward command centers of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. But that night everything changed brutally and unexpectedly. While Iranian operators were still trying to understand the alerts appearing on their screens, American military aircraft were already crossing the dark skies at low altitude, invisible to conventional radar. The mission had been prepared for months in absolute secrecy and involved some of the most highly trained units of the United States Armed Forces. The choice of the 173rd Airborne Brigade was no accident. Known for its rapid response capability and experience in combat operations in hostile terrain, the brigade had spent entire weeks training for that exact scenario. In the Italian Alps, military engineers built detailed replicas of the Iranian fortress so that the paratroopers could rehearse each stage of the invasion. Nighttime parachute jumps were repeated numerous times in mountainous terrain similar to that found near Hormuz. Specialized teams practiced breaching underground bunkers, using explosives to open armored doors, and quickly neutralizing protected command rooms. The soldiers carried extra ammunition, medical equipment, encrypted radios, and breaching tools specifically adapted for that attack. Meanwhile, small teams of Green Berets had been secretly infiltrated into the region days before the main operation. Hidden among the mountains and using advanced observation equipment, they monitored Iranian patrols, identified safe routes, and discreetly marked drop zones for the paratroopers who would arrive during the early morning hours. American intelligence had been tracking the expansion of that stronghold for over a year. Satellites revealed new underground excavations, expanded ammunition depots, and a significant increase in electronic transmissions linked to military operations in the strait. Recent information indicated that direct orders for attacks against merchant ships and coordinated movements of mobile missile platforms scattered along the coast were being issued from there. When these reports reached American commanders, the decision was made. The command center had to be destroyed before further Iranian actions threatened international maritime traffic. In the silent hangars of Aviano Air Base in Italy, enormous C-17 Globemaster aircraft were prepared for the mission. Pallets of heavy equipment were quickly loaded, while pilots reviewed extremely risky flight paths designed to avoid enemy radar. Every detail of the operation was protected by strict operational safety measures. Very few people knew the exact target until the last hours before the launch. When the final order finally arrived, the soldiers boarded in absolute silence. Many of them knew they were about to participate in one of the most daring airborne operations in recent years. Inside the aircraft, the tension was almost palpable. Red lights illuminated the concentrated faces of the paratroopers, while the deep sound of the engines filled the interior of the plane. Some double-checked their equipment. Others kept their eyes closed, trying to memorize every detail of the plan. The flight towards the Persian Gulf seemed endless. As the C-17s approached Iranian airspace, their altitude was drastically reduced. The aircraft began flying close to the ground to avoid detect. Outside, only the darkness of the mountains and the distant glimmer of the strait's waters could be seen. At precisely 2 o'clock in the morning, local time, the rear ramps opened. A cold wind rushed into the cabin as green lights illuminated above the doors. Without hesitation, the first soldiers jumped into the void. Hundreds of paratroopers plunged into the silent night, their parachutes opening against the black sky like ghostly shadows, descending over the mountains. The drop zone was extremely dangerous. Jagged rocks and narrow ravines surrounded the chosen location. Many soldiers landed violently, rolling over the stones before quickly retrieving their equipment. Even so, within minutes the teams began to reorganize, with impressive precision. Guided by the Green Berets already positioned in the area, the assault elements began their silent approach towards the Iranian stronghold. The path to the objective required traversing narrow ravines and avoiding enemy outposts. Special Forces operators led the groups along carefully planned routes, maintaining minimal communication so as not to reveal their presence. As they advanced through the dark mountains, the American soldiers could already see the lights of the enemy installation gleaming among the rocks in the distance. Radar antennas slowly rotated above the bunkers, while armed patrols traversed the perimeter, unaware that an entire force was rapidly approaching their positions. The attack began devastatingly. The moment the first American elements reached the outer perimeter, Apache helicopters appeared, flying low over the fortress. In a matter of seconds, Hellfire missiles were launched against radar systems and anti-aircraft positions. The explosions illuminated the entire mountain and destroyed the installation's main warning sensors before the Iranians even understood what was happening. Alarms began to sound throughout the complex as Iranian soldiers desperately rushed to defensive positions. But the initial impact of the attack had already plunged the fortress into complete chaos. Taking advantage of the confusion, companies from the 173rd Brigade breached the outer gates using shaped explosive charges. The detonations opened passages through the fortified barriers, and the paratroopers stormed the complex with impressive speed. Controlled bursts of M4 rifle fire echoed through the corridors as American teams advanced bunker by bunker, neutralizing resistance and securing strategic areas. At various points, the Iranian fighters reacted fiercely. Some attempted to organize defensive lines near the underground depots, while others opened fire with heavy machine guns from fortified towers. But the combination of total surprise, devastating air support, and intensive training allowed the Americans to maintain the momentum of the attack. Apache helicopters continued circling above the stronghold, firing on resistance positions that attempted to reorganize. Meanwhile, Green Beret teams infiltrated through side entrances and service tunnels discovered during prior reconnaissance. Their objective was to prevent Iranian officials from destroying sensitive information or escaping the underground command rooms. Internal corridors were filled with smoke, and emergency lighting flickered continuously as explosions rocked the upper levels of the facility. As they advanced through the underground galleries, the Americans discovered the true scale of the Iranian command center. Entire rooms were crammed with electronic consoles, digital maps, and live feeds from the Strait of Hormuz. Large screens displayed the positions of mobile missiles, routes of commercial vessels, and drone images monitoring maritime traffic. Iranian officials frantically attempted to erase data and destroy equipment before the arrival of American forces, but many were captured before they could complete the destruction. Paratroopers quickly isolated the main command areas, while intelligence specialists collected hard drives, classified documents, and highly sensitive communication equipment. Every second was precious. Demolition teams immediately began installing explosive charges on servers, missile control systems, and underground communication hubs. Under the red light of the emergency lamps, specialists worked at a rapid pace, connecting detonators and adjusting timers. The heat, smoke, and constant sound of gunfire created a suffocating atmosphere inside the fortress. Outside, the battle continued intensely. Iranian reinforcements attempted to climb the narrow mountain roads to retake the complex, but encountered obstacles. Heavy fire came from the defensive positions established by the 173rd Brigade. The Americans used machine guns, grenades, and close air support to prevent any significant approach. F-35s flew above the region, ensuring total air superiority and monitoring enemy movements around the strait. As explosives were installed in the underground levels, the operation entered its most critical phase. The Americans needed to completely destroy the operational capacity of the fortress before the arrival of larger reinforcements. Thermite charges began to be detonated, burning sensitive electronic components at extreme temperatures, capable of melting entire communication and command systems. Moments later, controlled explosions began to devastate the underground tunnels. The ground trembled violently as ammunition depots ignited. Columns of black smoke rose from the ventilation shafts scattered throughout the mountain. The heart of the Iranian advanced network in Hormuz was being destroyed before the eyes of its own defenders. The detonations were so intense that they could be seen for miles. Ship crews crossing the strait that morning reported enormous flashes illuminating the mountains, while explosions echoed over the dark waters. Inside the fortress, chaos reigned. Electrical systems failed, corridors collapsed, and internal communications had virtually disappeared. Even so, some Iranian groups continued fighting desperately in final attempts to halt the American advance. The paratroopers, however, maintained strict discipline. Each team followed precise schedules established before the mission. As soon as the main objectives were achieved and the destruction of critical systems confirmed, the order to withdraw was transmitted. Quickly, the soldiers began to retreat towards the previously defined extraction points in the mountains. Chinook helicopters landed in improvised areas, while Apache helicopters provided heavy cover against possible counterattacks. The Americans carried with them prisoners considered of high strategic value, as well as enormous quantities of intelligence material captured during the invasion. The last elements of the assault force detonated additional charges that caused remaining tunnels and underground entrances to collapse. Entire sections of the fortress began to crumble in on themselves as extraction aircraft sped away from the area. The entire time spent inside the main objective was less than 55 minutes. Less than an hour had been enough to transform one of Iran's most heavily guarded military centers into a field of smoldering ruins. In the following days, the impact of the operation spread rapidly throughout the region. Satellite images revealed large areas destroyed in the Iranian complex and plumes of smoke still rising from the mountains. Military analysts observed that Iran's ability to coordinate offensive operations in the strait had suffered a severe blow. Experienced officers had been captured, command systems destroyed, and years of military infrastructure wiped out in a single night. In Tehran, the reaction was immediate. Emergency meetings were convened as military leaders attempted to assess the extent of the losses. The Revolutionary Guard launched massive search operations in nearby regions and reinforced other coastal positions, fearing similar attacks. The episode also dramatically increased international tension. Many came to see the operation as a clear demonstration of American capability to penetrate deep into areas considered highly protected and execute extremely rapid precision strikes. For the 173rd Airborne Brigade, the mission reinforced its reputation as one of the most efficient rapid response forces in the world. The soldiers involved returned to high alert immediately after extraction, aware that the operation could trigger further retaliatory actions. Despite the impressive tactical success, everyone knew that the silent conflict waged in the shadows of the Middle East was far from over. The Strait of Hormuz remained quieter for a while, but the vulnerability exposed that morning left deep marks on Iranian military planners. The idea that their stronghold was untouchable had been shattered in less than an hour, and as the mountains slowly returned to silence, the memory of that night would remain etched as one of the most daring and impactful airborne operations ever executed in the region.